Okay, now that that is all settled, we can continue with our beautiful endeavor of those abilities. I got myself a glass of water to keep the throat agreeing to me talking all the time. Okay, now this is a very general look at all the abilities, so just keep calm. We'll get to the more interesting parts later as well. The engineering abilities. Emergency power to auxiliary, usually used for healers, increases your auxiliary power 15 to, I think, yeah, what is it even? Yeah, probably, I don't know. The internal cooldown of every power of the emergency power to something, okay, they lock out each other. They have a buff uptime of 30 seconds, so and a cooldown of 45. So if you use your emergency power to weapons, you will have for 30 seconds the effect of it, but the ability's cooldown will be 45. However, you can, after 15 seconds of internal cooldown, use another. Is the sound fine? Okay. After 15 seconds, you can use another emergency power to subsystem, whatever that might be. So you could just use emergency power to shields and emergency power to weapons and use each of them 15 seconds apart. If you use certain buffs or abilities that reduce your cooldown, you can easily get two of those together. Emergency power to auxiliary increases your auxiliary power, gives you some secondary effects. All of them give you some secondary effects. This increases your particle generators and graviton generators, if I remember correctly. It is mostly used for healers now. You don't really need that on a PvE damage boat. Emergency power to engines. This one makes you fly 10% faster, gives you more engine power, therefore you also turn faster. Now, it is kind of important to understand that these all give you subsystem power, which is important to your power levels. As we explored earlier, it is always good to have higher power levels. Okay. The emergency power to shields gives you a shield resistance. I think it reduces on the rank 1 your shield damage you take by like 10% or so. And it, on top of that, increases the subsystem power you have in your shield systems. The emergency power to weapons increases your energy weapon damage by 10% and also gives you subsystem power. The engineering team, as all the teams, clears you of certain debuffs. These are the engineering ones now. That usually applies to viral matrix. I don't really know if there's another one, and it also instantly repairs your ship. Okay, so we have three teams. We have the tactical team, the engineering team, and the science team. They used to lock out each other, but that was removed, so you can now use all of them at the same time if you choose to do so. Science team healing your shields, the tactical team distributing your shields, the engineering team healing your shields. Charged particle burst, energy siphon, those are all usually just PvP abilities, so we don't really need them in here. This one drains power of your enemy. It's kind of useless in PvE. Feedback pulse reflect energy damage. It can be used, but it doesn't really do much because enemies in PvE don't deal much energy damage. Charged particle burst makes cloaking devices inoperative. You don't really need that either. Higher ranks of hazard emitters, that is good. The photonic officer reduces all of your bridge officer cooldowns. Now if you use this ability, it will also reduce its own cooldown and it will last for 1 minute. I think it has 3-minute cooldown. And while the buff is actually active, all your other bridge officer abilities, none of your captain or set powers or something like that, will be reduced. But for example, if you have a tag team or so, that cooldown will be reduced. However, this is not really that useful for lower ranks of the ability. Polarized Hull 2, Science Team 2 just increases of the previous one. Scrambled Sensors makes the enemy attack each other. That's what the tooltip says. Now in PvP this is quite a potent ability. In PvE you only very rarely use that, like Tachyon Beam drains power, drains shields, we don't really need that either. Tractor Beam, as we said, Tractor Beam repulses. Now this is a very important ability for no-win scenario, where you push away up to 3 targets from you, 3 enemies. So if you stand in front of them, use this ability, a small Tractor Beam will appear and will fling out the enemy from you. It will just push it away. That is under the normal infected runs or so, you don't really need it. For no-win scenario, this is basically mandatory. Transfer Shield Strength 2 now has more shield resistance, heals more, but basically does the same. Tychon's Rift drains your enemy's power levels. Like if you have a good build that really emphasizes on this, you can, for example, knock someone's engines off with this and he just can't move anymore. For PvE, however, this is not that useful. You don't usually see it. It might become more interesting with Delta Rising, as all the enemies get a really huge boost to their shields. If you could drain their shield subsystem power, their shields will regen not as fast. They will have less energy damage resistances, and therefore you can take them out faster. So this could become interesting. Attack pattern, I don't really need to click any of those. Attack pattern beta 1. This upgrades your next, or for 15 seconds, for 10 seconds actually. For 10 seconds this upgrades your attacks, okay? Let's say you do a fired will and use attack pattern beta. Every shot of your fired will debuff the enemy with attack pattern beta. Beta reduces your enemy's damage resistance. The effect on the enemy will linger for 5 seconds, but you have the buff to apply the debuff on you for 10 seconds. So let's say I shoot the ball cube for those 10 seconds. Then the cube will be debuffed for the whole 10 seconds, but also for 5 seconds more, because the debuff that I applied at the last second will still be on him for 5. Okay. Attack pattern delta. This is basically the reverse effect of attack pattern beta. It doesn't apply a debuff when I shoot them, but it applies a debuff when they shoot me. However, this ability has a longer cooldown, and the damage resistance itself is about the same. So for PvE, you would always basically go for the attack pattern beta, while if you were playing PvP, you might switch that out to delta. It also increases your damage resistances, so if you fancy yourself a tank, you could use that. But let me emphasize at this point that you don't currently need a tank or a healer. You have all these hybrid builds flying around. All the DPS ships have such high survivability that you really don't need a tank. Everyone hopes probably that will change at some point, but that's just the way it is currently. Then we have all the increased abilities from what we earlier had, the Fired Will, Beam Overload, and all the PvP like subsystem targeting. Subsystem targeting, I think, also locks it out with other beam attacks, so that really doesn't work. And Beam Overload locks itself up with Fired Will. Cannon Rapid Fire is a single target damage increase of cannons. They will just shoot faster, and it's a damage increase to cannons. Okay. Cannon Scatter Volley does the same thing. It also increases the single target damage, but it also has the ability to hit up to 3 targets. That means that once you have 2 targets, Cannon Scatter Volley will just pull so far ahead of Cannon Rapid Fire that the only real spot when you want to have cannon rapid fire is either playing PvP or you have one big enemy that you really need to kill. Okay, but for all the current stuff, if you run cannons, go for scatter volley. It is also increased already against just one single target. Dispersal patterns are for mines. Mines aren't really that useful. I see people using them. They will kill your DPS basically. Tactical Team 2. The difference on this is that it gives you more weapons training and that. The difference is, however, so small, and especially you lose it when your ship loses crew, which happens when you get hit by torpedoes and don't have shields. So it is actually just about the same as Tactical Team 1. It also just distributes shields. It's just as fast. Therefore, you don't really need this ability. If you go for the torpedoes high yield 2 or torpedo spread 2, they also do just about the same. They just do increased percentages. Engineering abilities. Now this is where the lengthy list starts. However, we have almost made it through. The auxiliary to battery. Now this is something that is kind of mandatory on most of the Federation cruisers because of some some duty officers that we will take care of later. The ability itself does drain your aux power and redistribute it to your other subsystems like weapons, shields, and engines. That's it. But remember, it kills your aux power. Now there's certain ways of coming around that. I wouldn't look into that though too much. I mean, that is not really worth it in the beginning. Just look at this ability and say it is useful with duty officers. If you don't have them, you don't need it, and you usually don't need this ability in PvE. Like if you play a Federation cruiser, you will need it. All the others don't. Auxiliary to dampeners. This makes you immune to tractor beam, repulsors, all that tries to push you. It is usually not used in PvE. Auxiliary to structural 1 locks itself out with auxiliary to battery. Gives you a short increase to damage resistances and heals your hull. It's basically good for healers. The average cruiser can every now and then use it, but on Federation cruisers it locks itself out with the aux to battery, and on Romulan cruisers you don't really need it. Boarding Party 1, I haven't seen that in ages in PvE. Directed energy modulation. This is an ability that has a very clear application in conjunction with a duty officer. Basically what the ability does is it makes your weapons penetrate a small amount of shields. That doesn't sound too cool, I know, but it will get super cool later. Emergency power to auxiliary, emergency power to engines, shields, and weapons. Just all rank 2, awarding more percentages of what they did before. For example, the emergency power to weapons 2 now gives, instead of 10% all weapons damage, gives now 13.3, and it gives a little more weapons power. The engineering team 2 heals more. The extend shields is a healer's ability that you can only use on other people, and it gives them quite a ridiculous shield resistance, like 30% or so. It's quite good. And the reverse shield polarity. This ability has a yellowish glow all over your screen. If you use it, like, your whole ship will get submerged in this yellow bubble, and all the damage of energy weapons that you take refill your shields, and that quite quickly. Therefore, it is really hard to kill you with energy weapons, and basically always in PvE. And there's a duty officer that it can even increase the duration of this ability. Okay, so now we get most of the stuff just in higher ranks. The Lieutenant Commander abilities, Charged Particle Burst, Energy Siphon, we don't really need. Feedback Pulse, we don't need. Gravity Wall. This is the next ability that really comes in handy if you have the no one scenario at hand. There you really need it, otherwise for your average PvE build you don't really need it. Photonic Officer reduces cooldowns more. Photonic Shockwave disables your enemy. Don't really need that, it's like 2 seconds. Scrambled Sensors, Tractor Beam Repulsors will push them further and deal more damage now. Titan's Rift drains more. Vital Matrix disabled subsystem, don't really need those. Okay, now we get to the part where it gets interesting once more. Attack Pattern Beta 2 just does the same thing, it just decreases your enemy's resistances even more. Delta 2, same thing. Attack Pattern Omega 1, now this is a very versatile power. It gives you a buff for 15 seconds that increases your damage, makes you immune to movement debuffs, so if someone tractor beams you, you can not only use Polarized Hull, you can also use Attack Pattern Omega to get out of that. It gives you resistances, it gives you turn speed. This just gives you from everything something, and you don't need to debuff your enemy. Like if you have a huge AoE ability and you cannot really spread it before you hit them with it, like you don't really shoot all the enemies with beta usually, as the fight will only has to actually hit them, or Cannon Scatter Volley only hits 3 targets. So if you have 10 targets there and you want to go for Omega to just amp up your damage and not decrease their resistance to it. Cannon Rapid Fire now deals more damage to single targets, same for Cannon Scatter Volley. Dispersal Patterns, okay. Mines we don't really need. Aceton Beam. This one reduces your enemy's energy weapon damage. Now, you don't want to use this in PvE. You probably don't even want to use it in PvE. I don't really see that. You will sometimes have someone using it on you. In no one scenario, certain races tend to do that. You can always clear that with hazard emitters. Aux to battery 2, it distributes now more power. There is, unless you are entirely forced to get this, you should never pick this ability. Because it really doesn't do anything else than the part 1 just gives a little more power, which you usually don't need. Auxiliary to dampeners 2, now it still makes you immune to knock and repel. However, the kinetic damage resistance will be more and he will turn a little faster. Don't really use that in PvE as well. The Aux to structural now heals more, gives you more damage resistance, that can be good for a healer. Boarding Party, don't use it. Slam 3, 2 doesn't have many applications as well. Like War Plasma, Extend Shields, RSP. The only one we need really to talk about is the Eject War Plasma. It will basically do the Riker maneuver when you eject your War Plasma out of your missiles. You need to be really close, and it does not that much damage if you don't really build your ship around it, so for PvE not really that useful. And the commander abilities basically require you to get another person to train you, while some of them cannot even be trained by other captains, but just come randomly on bridge officers that you picked up from certain quests as level rewards or something along the lines, okay? So there is nothing new there. There's just better versions of the previous abilities, and you cannot even get all of them. Like Attack on Omega 2 is being suggested here. If you go to your guy and your attack captain, you need to close this window. However, first you can train in Attack Pattern Omega 3, which has more percentages on everything. So yeah, don't go for Attack Pattern Omega 2. Omega 2, just find someone who will train it for you. Okay, so that is all the abilities there are. Now, it's not our position to judge that something shouldn't be in the game because it's cheap and it's all cheating. It's all padding the meters. You just have to make do with what you have. Okay, your goal is to optimize within the system. And kill enemies faster, so just get whatever you need and pull it together. You have certain limitations, which is the bridge officer seating on your ship, and that is really where it gets interesting. Now you have to fit all of that information I just gave you into a ship. You have to know which ones you get, which work well together, how you can put that all onto a ship, and which duty officers you need. Like, there's so much involved. There's a beautiful page, however, that you can use, which is called the RyanSTO Academy. There you can just click together what you want to get and see how that works out. Like, this is our build for the Fleet Patrol refit, with which we did the No One Scenario 2 man, and you could now choose from the list of all the possibilities in here and see how that works out for you. Okay, if you can get everything in. It can also give you traits, skills, description, notes, and if you really need help on something, you should go to RyanSTO Academy, go to the skill planner, make your click in your build, basically go to the DPS public channel and ask for help. People will usually look at this, they will see that you have applied yourself just a little, and then it's not that difficult to get any help at all. But it's kind of difficult to help someone when you don't even know where he's standing at. Okay, so this is a beautiful playground to just see if you could fit all of that, what you want, into a single ship, see how that goes. You always have certain limitations or things that force you to do something. For example, if we want to play No One Scenario with this, we have to have the Lieutenant Commander Universal to be a science guy to get the gravity well in there. Okay. Now that just makes you use certain ships because you otherwise cannot get all the abilities you want, you need, or you would like to have. Okay, now at this point it's also good to talk about something else, like the usage of abilities. People will not minimize their game, but the amount of space. People will usually use their abilities randomly for some reason. Like, if you look at some of the RyanSTO videos, it is some random dude clicking all over the place and hitting all the abilities, and it's not making that much sense. Okay, so don't use your abilities randomly. For example, this way we have our timeline when the HDD actually decide to power up again. Like this way we have the time, okay? Let's say we use the emergency power to weapons. Okay, something like that, okay? That will last for 30 seconds, which is kind of long. Which is probably more than we need here, 3, 4, 5. We just make the background of this all yellowish because the ability is yellowish, okay? We scroll a little. So this is 10 seconds, this is 15 seconds, 20, 25, 30, okay? So if I use my emergency power weapons, my ship will have the buff for this amount of time, okay? That means all the abilities and all the shots will benefit from it. Now, let's say I use tactical team next. This one will only stay on. We need to go to this now because already 1 second has passed. This will be a red one now, so we take these and say this one stays on for 10 seconds. Okay. Okay, it's actually 10, just making sure. So the tactical team now benefits from having emergency power to weapons. That itself doesn't do much, obviously. However, if you look at the ability, it increases your energy weapons training. So instead of 1623, it then deals 1653. If you use also emergency power 2 weapons on that, it's already 1969. Okay, so we increase the damage, and it all adds up. Like you want to maximize the amount of buffs you have up at the same time if you use your special attacks. Now let's say we go next for the attack pattern Omega. This is also attack, so we can leave the color, add 3 of those. Okay, so that's what it would look like. If we use the ability here, you can see down here it will stay on for 15 seconds. Okay, so and also now our attack team is already fading a little early as we're keeping on using our buffs. Let's say we use the Cannon Scatter Volley next. Okay, that is a 10-second buff that increases your damage, and you can already see here that you are already indeed losing on top 2 seconds at the very least to your tag team of your tag team's buff. However, the tag team itself is not that a massive ability, so it's kind of good to have it for the most part, but you can't really make it work all together anyways, and you have to get your Cannon Scatter Volley to all of the Omega. That is far more important. So let's say we also use our directed energy modulation, just making this a little shorter here. That buff itself will stay on for 8 seconds. Okay, 5, 6, 7, 8. It will obviously stay longer, but we don't need it for its real effect, we need it for its duty officer. So this is the duration of your directed energy modulation that you want. You can see how you now have already 4 buffs going to increase your Cannon Scatter Volley. Okay, and this is where the damage comes from. Just stacking it all up and optimizing your uptime of certain buffs, and then shooting actually the enemy. Okay, you would also use the attack pattern alpha, which is 30 seconds, so I don't really need to put it in, as you can see it's long enough. You also get the tactical fleet, another 30 seconds. You should talk to your teammates to optimize usage on that. Okay, so this is where the good damage comes from, having more buffs up at the same time. Now you need to basically figure out which ones you really want or need to make it work. Okay, so as you can not see on this build, if I use an attack pattern, it will always give me a 15-second cooldown on all attack patterns. So after my attack pattern Omega has faded, as the last 15 seconds, we will be able to use another attack pattern. Okay. And now we have to actually find the timings on all the different cycles we need to fit into this. Cannon Scatter Volley can only be used every 15 seconds, and the attack pattern can only be used every 15 seconds. So basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one will be your, I think that's actually the tag team, isn't it? Okay, so this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now this one will be your cooldown, or when you cannot use another Cannon Scatter Volley. Okay, so after this you want to have the next Cannon Rapid Fire Scatter Volley or whatever. Even if it's fired well, you just have to look at the increased cooldowns. But you really only have to maximize the uptime of all your abilities. And for that you also have to look into duty officers, as they help you out with that. So you can see the attack pattern Omega has 1 minute cooldown, but it always jumps down to 51 seconds for me because of one of my duty officers. Okay, so to really emphasize on this, use your abilities so they stack on top of each other, so they actually improve each other. Like if you use attack pattern Omega, it increases all the damage by 25%. That is okay. If you use attack per alpha, and it increases your damage by 50%, but it also increases your crit chance and your crit severity. If you use your fleet, that increases your damage by 30%. Now this is not multiplicative. It will only add up to each other, okay? But you have secondary effects like the increased crit chance, and the increased crit chance will all benefit from attack pattern omega, and will also benefit from fleet, tactical fleet. So make that all come together and make one huge attack so it actually works. And that is basically the craftsmanship of making your cooldowns rotate properly. Like you need some expertise with how you do that. I will give you a guide on how you can do cannons and beams, but generally speaking, that is what you have to look out for. Like you want to maximize your uptime on most of the abilities to actually increase your damage. Okay. Which brings us to... Oh, I have jumped quite ahead. Okay. Let's just go to another ship where we actually have... Or we could just switch out one guy, couldn't we? This guy will not work. This guy will work. Okay, perfect. Cool. Oh, come on, roll please. Okay. So we have, let's say we have two attack patterns and we have two cannon scatter volleys. What we should aim for is have a attack pattern and an cannon scatter volley together all the time. Okay, that is the best thing we could hope for. The problem is the cooldown doesn't work. Like if I use beta 1 and the cannon scatter volley, beta has its cooldown, okay, so it's not taken all down. We could use other abilities, we could shoot, we could do whatever. Now we use attack pattern omega, scatter volley, also working perfectly, okay. You can see we have this buff and the other buff. We want all the buffs we can have at the same time. However, you will really soon see how this is not working out anymore. We now use beta and scatter volley both up now. You can see now this discrepancy, okay. The cannon scatter volley is on a shorter cooldown than the attack pattern beta omega. We could now wait 10 seconds, or we need to find another solution to this. There are duty officers which are kind of mandatory for most of the builds. For the average cannon build, you need two guys that are called Zamok General. He reduces the cooldown of your attack pattern ability. Let's just switch out any random guy just like that. Now use Omega and Cannon Scatter Volley. You will see now the increased effect of 2, as they will now reduce the cooldown of both of them. The other two copies obviously still on the internal lockout, so we can now use them. And this, as you can now see, gets us actually back to where we were initially. So we can now use these two together once more. Okay. You could also do this with Aux to Bad. If you have the Technician Duty Officer, they reduce all of your Bridge Officer ability cooldowns on use of Auxiliary to Battery. That can be done. It is more clicking involved. Like you don't only use those two, but you would have now to use Auxiliary to Battery to reduce the cooldown. But it can be done, and it is kind of mandatory for most of the cruisers. Okay, so if you run Fire at Will, however, this ability would be a Fire at Will, not a Cannon Scatter Volley, as you don't have cannons then, and the lockout on that is 20 seconds. Okay, so if you have a lockout of 20 seconds, you only need one of these ammo guys, and you can even on most of the ships work without any of those at all if you just use double beta and double fired will and one omega. You can alternate an attack pattern all the time. So these duty officers just help you get where you want, okay? As I said, for cannons you usually want 2, for beams you usually want 1, and if you don't have any, you can still make it. Other noteworthy duty officers are, for example, if you look at this guy, he's called the Space Warfare Duty Officer. That is how you will usually find them. He is against Spark. He increases all damage by 10%. And you would say, oh dude, this is awesome. I dealt 1,600 something on the tooltip. If I add 10% to that, it's 70-60. Problem is, it doesn't work that way. He increases some sort of base damage, so his influence on your actual damage is really, really low, okay? He is like 1/3 of a tech console, or with the new ones almost 1/4 then, as they increase your damage by 33% already, okay? So he is not as good as you would think. There are lots of percentages in this game that will mislead you, like on use of battery abilities, something like when you use a engine or weapon battery, it will increase your damage by 10% for each dot, and you can have 3, so you think it's 30%, and you think it's awesome, but the problem is it's not real percentages. That is why you need to look at these numbers down here. You use the ability and see, oh dude, it only goes up by 7%, I think would be the influence of that. So then you can really judge on whether that's worth it, having 3 of those duty officers or not. Okay. Other really noteworthy duty officers are the Marion Francis Stillmer for Federation side. Gives you plus 200 resistance to weapon subsystem energy drain for 8 seconds. That is why I did put the direct engine regulation only for 8 seconds here. If you use this ability, it will reduce the amount of energy drain from shooting weapons. Therefore, consecutive shots will deal more damage. This is the highest damage gain you can currently get. It works for cannons and it works for beams. Okay, so here's a good increase. He is quite expensive, but he's a good increase. The duty officers for the Ox to Bat builds, you will get in a thing called the Batron cluster, the Tron, whatever you call it. If you go to the Transwarp conduit, fly over here to the Gamma Orionis block and down to the southern border, you will get the duty officer assignments for the Batron cluster, and that will open up an assignment chain that lets you colonize there. Let me actually see if I can find, like, they look like these, colonization something else. I don't even have it, huh? I don't know. So the final, for completing the final one, then you get a blue technician, which increases your, which decreases your coolants already by 8%. If you crit the support colonization efforts mission, which takes 4 hours, you will get a purple one. You can have 3 of those. So each time you use the auxiliary to battery ability, you take off 30% of the cooldown of your abilities, of your bridge officer abilities. Therefore, the average Ox to Bat build requires you to have 2 Ox to Bats. They have a 10-second lockout on each other, and if you cycle that properly, you can get away with using only 1 fired will, for example, and still make it to the 20-second minimum cooldown of the ability, while the ability actually itself has 30 seconds. Okay, so other noteworthy duty officers for your space layout could be the Dick Rock guy. He increases your shield power when you use energy weapons. That would be cannons or beams, and that is good for having more overall weapon systems, more subsystem power, which then improves your damage due to your warp core having the amp, which improves all your damage. If you have more than 75 in a certain subsystem, stacking for all your 4 subsystems. So you want to aim at having all 4 above 75. Okay, then we have this guy. I don't think the name is specific, it's just the damage control engineer. He has a 35% chance to reduce the recharge time of emergency power to subsystems abilities by 30%. My god, so much talking. If you can have a maximum of 3 of those, so that means you could either just run the same ability over and over. Let's see if it procs. No, it doesn't. Otherwise, this would have gone to like 30. And if you have 3 of those, it's basically guaranteed. However, if you have 2 of those abilities, like emergency power to shields and emergency power to weapons, I should actually be able to use the emergency power to weapons one, which I have for no apparent reason on this build. You can now see the lockout on this ability by having the buff still. So this would be a little less for another subsystem power. This one got decreased by 15 seconds. That is what it does. So you could actually use it over and over now. You can see these 2 cooldowns are almost identical. If you, however, use emergency power to shields and emergency power to weapons, the lockout will be a little shorter and you can just use them alternatingly and therefore gain both the buffs on yourself. And when you use emergency power to weapons, it also procs the chance to reduce the remaining cooldown on emergency power to shields, for example. So that one can come in handy if you have only a base for 2 or even 1 emergency power to subsystem ability. Recharge time for tactical, team and buff. This is halfway useful if you have only 1 tag team on you. Outside of that, you usually should have space for 2 anyways. Okay. Killel is more of a PvP guy, but he can also be used in PvE. He removes all your debuffs on yourself if you use emergency power to something. Like you have a plasma fire taking you down and you know you will die. You use emergency power to shields, which really has nothing to do with it. This duty officer might kick in and remove the plasma burn debuff. Those usually are the most important PvE guys. Like you have the space warfare, you have the Zamox, you have Marion Francis, you have Dick Rock, you have the damage control engineers, and if you don't have the Zamox, you will usually have technicians. If they go by the name of Horatio or 10 of 10, it really depends on whether you do the Batron colonization or not. Okay, I guess this is a good time to wrap it up for today. I have been talking for a little over 1 hour, I think like 1:30.